Well, we had explored Frodo's story of tragedy, but now we go all the way back to how it all began. With, of course, the adventure of Bilbo Baggins and the dwarves to the Lonely Mountain.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
I'm not even supposed to be here today! Oh, fuck you!
Come on, you want me to drive? You're supposed to be suicidal. Remember,
I'll
anybody
drive.
to drive. Get in the car.
Fucking shit! Fuck me in the fucking ass! Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt!
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I am finally back with movie reviews with a long-awaited new movie review. And as we review, we are going back to Middle-earth again like we did last December. And to start it off, we're obviously reviewing the trilogy, which technically came right before Lord of the Rings, but technically got released after Lord of the Rings. But it's an adaptation of the story of Bilbo Baggins and his adventure with the dwarfs up to the Lonely Mountain to confront Smaug. And that, of course, was the film that started it all, 2012's The Hobbit, an unexpected journey directed by Peter Jackson, who is back for this one. So, how does this all start? Well, this is set 60 years before the Lord of the Rings, The Journey to Defeat Sauron, with Frodo and the whole fellowship. This one, you get to know Bilbo's journey. Bilbo Baggins, who's played by Martin Freeman in the 60 years earlier scenes of the trilogy, he gets swept into a quest to reclaim the lost dwarf kingdom of Erebor from the fearsome dragon Smaug, who I will get to around later. Approached out of the blue by wizard Gandalf the Grey, Bilbo finds himself joining a company of 13 dwarves led by the legendary warrior Thorin Oakenshield, played by Thorin Oakenshield. Their journey will take them into the wild through treacherous lands swarming with goblins and orcs, deadly wargs and giant spiders, shapeshifts and sorcerers. Their goal lies in the eastern wastelands of the Lonely Mountain, but first they have to escape the goblin tunnels. Bilbo then meets the creature that will pretty much change his life forever, Gollum, and how he discovers the one ring that brings back Sauron. Here, pretty much when he's alone with Gollum on the shores of the underground lake, and the unassuming Bilbo not only discovers depths of guile and courage that's surprising in him, but he gains possession of the precious ring that holds unexpected useful qualities right there, and what pretty much started off the trilogy called Lord of the Rings. So yeah, this is the first entry of the trilogy. This was supposed to be a two-parter, but Warner Brothers, hey, Lord of the Rings was successful, let's do it again with this. Yeah, but thankfully though, let's not get into the later stuff. Let's get on to the good stuff for now. So, how was this movie made? Well, a film adaptation of The Hobbit was in development for years ever since The Lord of the Rings in the 2000s was very successful when Peter Jackson did those movies. Jackson was originally just going to produce and write a two-film adaptation of The Hobbit, but it was going to be directed by Guillermo del Toro. But then May 2010, he left the project, and after about 2 years of working with Jackson and his production team because of the delays caused by the financial problems at MGM that be co-producing the project, then that October, Peter Jackson was announced to be coming back to direct the movie. And the Hobbit films, like The Lord of the Rings, were produced back-to-back. And filming began for the Hobbit films started March 21st, 2011 in New Zealand. And they ended on July 6, 2012. After 266 days of filming. Then pickups got filmed in July 2012 for this entry. Work on the film was going to be completed on 26 November, just 2 days prior to the film's Wellington premiere originally. But anyway, now when it came to the trailers, well, the first trailer first premiered in December 2011. and was shown before screenings of The Adventures of Tintin, and then got released on the internet to the public the same day. Right there. And of course, like when this trailer premiered, of course people were hyped. Right there. And of course then another trailer premiered on September 2012. And even with marketing help, even Denny's joined in on the promotion with a few items with a Shire theme menu. Right there. Whether it was a smoothie, a Shire Hobbit breakfast, even. I remember because when I went to go see this opening weekend, I actually went to Denny's to have some of their stuff first before going to see this movie. Back when it came out like about 12 years ago. But after all that, An Unexpected Journey, the first entry, premiered in Wellington on November 28, 2012, and then released on December 12th in New Zealand, and on December 14th, 2012 in the United States by Warner Bros. Pictures and New Line Cinema combined. The Lord of the Rings was released by New Line Cinema independently, but this is now when Warner Bros. Now own New Line Cinema, because New Line Cinema had too many struggling flops and they were almost on the verge of bankruptcy as an independent studio, so they had to join Warner Brothers. Yeah, pretty much 9 years after Return of the King. When it came to the reactions, this movie got mixture to positive-ish reviews from critics, but made $1.017 billion at the box office and became the fourth highest grossing film of 2012. And it received numerous Academy Award nominations like production design, makeup, hairstyling, and visual effects. And yeah, there were two other movies that followed, but those are later reviews. But anyway, as for my reaction, when I heard The Hobbit was getting a film adaptation from Peter Jackson, yeah, I was excited for it because since Jackson's Middle-earth was making a comeback with the story that chronologically started it all. When I was in grade 9, first year of high school, around the year this movie released, I had read the book the very first semester and finished it in the nick of time, a few weeks before the movie had even come out. Right there. And then during opening weekend Saturday morning, stopped at Denny's to have one of the promotional food on their menu, and then went to see this film at the theater next to that Denny's. How was this movie? Honestly, when it comes to this trilogy, I was never a big fan of this trilogy, but when it comes to this movie, this is the one I like the best. This was definitely a nice start to a trilogy that just declined as it progressed, whereas Lord of the Rings still got epic as it progressed. Well, Fellowship was great, Two Towers was great, minor bit of a step down, Return of the King was fucking phenomenal. This one was good. Yeah, you were never going to top Lord of the Rings, obviously, but this one, it's they were just trying to cash in on Lord of the Rings with this trilogy, but this was a very good start to the series. It's kind of a sense of the rest of the process, and the movie is kind of slow for the first half hour, but it doesn't affect the movie that much. The story is pretty fun and interesting, and the film's protagonists were fun, and definitely, it's nice to see Gandalf the Grey back right here. And the filming and directing really dazzles you and makes you kind of still makes you wish you lived in Middle-earth. The Hobbit Unexpected Journey, though, is kind of a different movie here. It's not like all Lord of the Rings, because this is before Sauron, before all the tragedy started in that trilogy. This is still set in the world of Middle-earth, but what was in common with this whole trilogy? You got a few familiar faces, but this one's technically more of The Hobbit was kind of a kid's story, so this one's definitely going to be more lighthearted. You already know that. It's we're really right here is you do get you do start off with seeing Elijah Wood again for a brief bit, and the scene that's set before the opening scene of Fellowship, in home again, before you get onto the current storyline. And the first thing you notice is the movie is definitely a lot funnier than Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings had some lighthearted funny moments, but the thing is though, it was still dark when it knew it needed to be. The Hobbit is a much more lighthearted tone because The Hobbit is a more lighthearted story, and it's technically just more of a normal adventure. That's more of a normal adventure, and because you didn't have to deal with Sauron and that stuff. Right here. You have some very hilarious moments here as well. It's a little difficult to get into at times, because with the lighthearted opening and the countless visiting dwarfs then gets underway after you first meet Bilbo. Darren. But it's not childish, it's more lighthearted, but it's not an overly childish film like a lot of stuff today is. There's still many parts that the adult audience can still relate to. It's still kind of a fun action flick. how we pretty much start off this trilogy. Well, how this movie starts off, the whole trilogy, you first know the backstory of Thorin, the backstory of Smaug, right there as like Ian Holm, may he rest in peace, is narrating it. And then after that whole backstory, we start off with pretty much the first half of an opening scene with Ian Holm, Bilbo, and Frodo. Yeah, like Elijah Wood does come back for this brief one scene cameo. Like before we first saw, like how Fellowship of the Ring started, we saw Frodo reading, and then seeing Gandalf arrive. He's like, "You're late, Gandalf. A wizard's never late." And then they had that happy reunion right there before they went to go knock on Bilbo's door. Right here, like this is how this all started. Apparently, like right there, like Bilbo's reading some of Frodo finds some of Bilbo's things. Bilbo tells him not to touch them. And he goes to get the mail for all the party invite responses. And then after going over all that, and knowing that Gandalf's going to be arriving soon, Frodo sets off to go to the woods to read so he can go surprise Gandalf with that greeting we saw in Fellowship. And then after that, Bilbo continues writing his story of his adventures. And then we flash back to 60 years, how it really all pretty much starts off. Really all starts off with where we finally see Martin Freeman Bilbo, 60 years before he had found that ring and before he had gone on that journey. Pretty much, and when it comes to the backstory that Bilbo is writing about the dwarf, about Thorin and the whole thing that starts this whole movie, like long before Bilbo gets involved, like the Dwarf King Thor bought this prosperity for his kin under the Lonely Mountain after the arrival of the dragon Smaug. Smaug destroyed the town of Dale, drove the dwarves out of the mountain and took their hoard of gold, and Thor's grandson Thorin saw King Thorondal and his wood elves on a nearby hillside, but the elves instead chose to leave and not aid them, and it resulted in Thorin hating the elves. So then we get to back when Bilbo was younger, but when he's played by Martin Freeman. He's 50 years old around this time, and he gets tricked by the wizard Gandalf the Grey, who he meets for the first time, into hosting his dinner for Thorin and his company of dwarves, who go by the names Balin, Dwalin, Fili, Kili, Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Bifur, Bofer, and Bombur. Gandalf's aim is to recruit Bilbo as the company's burglar to aid them in their quest to enter the Lonely Mountain. Bilbo doesn't want to accept that at first because he's not an adventure kind of person. Though, and especially when all the dwarves come in, they raid his home, they eat all his food. And right there, and he's just like, when you meet like the first dwarf that arrives, it's like, so, like the Bilbo's like, do we know each other? No, and just comes in and like eats Bilbo's supper that he's about to eat, and then because like Gandalf marked the door, Thorin's arriving a little late. Thorin's the last one to arrive, and at first Bilbo does not want to aid them in the quests and stuff. And especially because he's frustrated that they basically just raided his home and ate all of his food, raided all his pantry. But however, after hearing like the dwarves kind of sing their Lonely Mountain song, he has a change of heart the next morning when he sees the dwarves gone. And he still sees a contract still there, so he signs it. Pretty much goes after them. Immediately goes after them, and one hobbit's asking, "Bilbo, where are you going?" And Bilbo replies, "I'm going on an adventure." And so he joins the rest of the crew. So they travel onward, and during their whole journey, they see some ponies gone by trolls, the 3 trolls that Bilbo had talked about in the beginning of Fellowship, and the stone statues that Frodo, Sam, Merry, Pippin discover after Frodo got stabbed by the Nazgul in Fellowship. Those trolls. That also does happen in the book too. Yeah. Bilbo's sent to go get back the ponies, and he sees the 3 trolls about to eat them, and so him and the dwarves are captured by the trolls. But Bilbo stalls the trolls from eating them until dawn, because if dawn comes, they'll turn to stone. And Gandalf exposes the trolls to sunlight, and they turn to stone. The company then locates the trolls' grave, and they find treasure and even elven blades. And Thor and Gandalf then take an elf-made blade, like Glandrain and Orcris, and Gandalf then gives his elven dagger to Bilbo. When it comes to Martin Freeman as Bilbo, I think he's very well cast for younger Bilbo. His demeanor and technique are perfect for the role of Bilbo Baggins. He excludes the homely, simply matter of a hobbit very effectively. Ian McKellen still once again does terrific coming back for the role of Gandalf the Grey. Still just a very great performance he gave in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Richard Armitage as Thorin Oakenshield, it's not too bad. I mean, when it comes to the character, not so sure about him as Thorin as a character, but like the Richard Armitage's performance as the character. If anything, like, like Thorin does turn out to be kind of a hero of the piece, and like the rest of the dwarves are also pretty brilliant. And many of them are definitely kind of highlights of the film. Like there. And the special effects, like, they're not as spectacular as Lord of the Rings, but they're still pretty spectacular in some scenes. And there's this rock giant battle that's a pretty memorable moment at around the very end of the movie. The makeup effects up to the job too, like the attention to detail, right down to the scratches and a look of the weapon the characters wield, also pretty great. Like, this was definitely a nice film to see in 3D back when this movie came out in theaters. Kind of the way Jackson intended, and yeah. And it looked pretty well stunning in 3D. Right there. And like right there, you even have like the eagles, the stone giants, the trolls, they really stand out in effects, but definitely the one that definitely still always stands out the most in all of these Middle-earth films is Gollum. He still has the same CGI design he had in The Lord of the Rings. He still looks just as terrific as he did in that trilogy, and it's definitely nice to see him again for a brief cameo here. Especially Andy Serkis still giving an even more fun, even more enjoyable performance as the creature here. And when it comes to the ones I'm not a fan of, the villain Azog, the orc villain Azog of the trilogy, it honestly is one of the least well designed stuff, because Azog just looks like some creature, some pale, bald creature from a horror film. The Goblin King looks kind of way too ridiculous and just way too goofy in my eyes. And the screenplay gets a little kind of juvenile and cliched at times. Like there's kind of like the dinner scene, or Thorn being angry at Bilbo, and then just he's just gonna come to accept him. It gets kind of cliche with that, where Thorin at first hates Bilbo and does not like having him around and does not care for his safety, but then at the end he suddenly accepts him, and that's how it's going to go. It's just kind of a cliched way. Right there, that's a bit too cliched. There's still some spots where it's humorous there, because this is a much more lighthearted story. Like with Bilbo and Gandalf's scenes, like when they first meet, or like the council scene, or the game of riddles, terror. And like geography was photographed very well. Like the New Zealand setting is very perfect depiction for J.R. Tolkien's film adaptations, and returning actors do a splendid job here. Like the late Christopher Lee, it comes back for Saruman, really does keep pace well with the rest of the cast. May Christopher Lee rest in peace, and Hugo Weaving back as Elrond, Cate Blanchett is back as Lady Galadriel. They still look quite the same as they did in the LOTR trilogy a decade before this came out. Here, so they did really well with designing the characters, and they still look the same, despite some of the new ages their actors became. Then of course Gandalf and Saruman are not the only wizards in this movie. You do meet a new wizard that was never in Lord of the Rings. Like, we never find out what happened to him after this trilogy, and that's Ragnados the Brown. More on him later. But he finds Gandalf in a company, and he recounts, like, this Dol Guldur with the necromancer, the sorcerer that was corrupting Greenwood with dark magic. So Gandalf and the gang get chased by the orcs, and so Gandalf leads them through this hidden passage to Rivendell. And there you meet Lord Elrond back again, and he discloses this hidden indication of a secret door where the company's map of the Lonely Mountain that will be visible only on Durin's Day. And of course, like, Thorin is obviously not happy to be seeing the elves again, as he still hates them for not aiding any of his people. Then Gandalf later approaches the White Council, which is Elrond, Galadriel, and Saruman the White, who we all know is going to get corrupted by Sauron eventually and become evil, and presents this Morgul blade, which is this weapon of the Witch King, and that Ragnados obtained from Dol Guldur. And while Saruman presses concern of the more present matter of the dwarves' quest, and requests that Gandalf kind of put an end to it, and Gandalf then reveals, though, that Galadriel had anticipated this, and so the dwarves have to move forward without him. there. So, like, when it comes to a movie trying to be faithful to its source material, not every movie can be very slavishly faithful to the source material, especially with two mediums and distinct advantages and disadvantages. The Hobbit: Unexpected Journey is definitely no exception, but a movie can take dramatic license with the book's plot and characters provided. But however, though, it doesn't really deviate too much from the source material at all. It still succeeds in being pretty faithful to the source material in a lot of scenes. And one of the main themes of the Hobbit novel is, like, no matter how small, timid, and uncertain you are, you have the traits and courage to accomplish some many great things. Like in the novel, Bilbo is kind of more of a reluctant hero. Especially like whenever he curled into a position when Gandalf and the dwarves would explain the danger of their quest. Here, though, like in this movie, Bilbo is definitely honestly, the movie version of Bilbo here feels kind of better written. He comically does faint, though. However, like, he doesn't get overly terrified in every single scene. It actually does have quite a bit of brave courage on the end of the film when he fights Azog. Like, in the movie, Martin Freeman's Bilbo is really refreshing and very, very fussy and indignant. That knows he's kind of now randomly got dragged and selected into this quest by a bunch of dwarves he doesn't know, or a story he doesn't even know until, like, throughout the entire journey. And even shows his, like, constant unwillingness to go on the journey more admirably, especially after because Thorin doesn't like him. And some right there, and some of the changes with Bilbo are actually kind of done for better to make him kind of a better character than he was in the novel. You have an even better touching illustration of Bilbo's resolve around, like, the end of the film, and after the Eagles rescue Bilbo, Gandalf, and the dwarves before Azog can kill them. Which, well, more on that will come later, but, like, the whole cast was perfect. The newbies were perfect. The returning ones from Lord of the Rings were perfect. Got the 13 dwarf. The actors for the 13 dwarfs were terrific. They're definitely worth knowing as the movie progresses. And then, of course, the old dwarf Balin telling his story of how he believed in Thorin was very impressive. And you really understand, like, why they want to get back to that mountain that Smaug is guarding. But it's kind of a little bit more hard for Bilbo to leave his, like, warm, nice home in the Shire. Which, by the way, Howard Shore's Shire theme even comes back for the Shire scenes, and it's still a terrific score to listen to, even 9 years after The Lord of the Rings had debuted. Like there, and it's like it's not really more obvious why Gandalf chooses Bilbo for this journey, but in the beginning of the movie, like, when you see Gandalf, it gives this big smile on your face. Especially when you're waiting for his appearance, and, like, you know you're not going to get stuff like too much of a perfect battle like you did in, like, Lord of the Rings, though. So anyways, after the whole scene with Rivendell, the company then journeys right into the Misty Mountains after Thorin does not want to stay in Rivendell anymore. They go into the Misty Mountains, and they pretty much find themselves in this colossal battle between stone giants. And then they take refuge in a cave where Thorin is pretty much now annoyed that Bilbo's with them and thinking Bilbo should have stayed home. And annoyed that Bilbo interfered, and Bilbo hears all this. And so he's pretty much about to leave and head back to the Shire next day. Even though Balm pretty much tries to convince him to stay, and Thorin's overhearing that Bilbo's leaving. Right there. But then, as, like, Bilbo's about to leave, though, they then fall, and they get captured by goblins, and they're taken to the leader, the Great Goblin King, who is one of my least favorite aspects of the movie. But Bilbo manages to escape and becomes separated from the dwarves, and though he falls right into this little pit where he encounters Gollum, who's about to eat a goblin that fell with Bilbo down there. So you see Gollum again, still the great CGI he had in Lord of the Rings. And unknowingly, Gollum drops that ring that is about to play a big role in Middle-earth. So Bilbo finds the ring, but also finds himself confronted by Gollum. And their scene they have together is very funny. Like, this was the creature that would become funny and terrifying in Lord of the Rings trilogy. Actually this time is not as much of a threat because he's only there for one scene in the movie, and because, like, he only had one scene in the book. But, like, there's even so many funny moments where they announced they're gonna play this game of riddles, and Gollum's like, "And if it loses, what then?" Well, if he loses, Princess, we eat it. If Baggins loses, we eat some whole. And Bilbo, like, just contemplates it. And he agrees to that, and fair enough. Like, if Bilbo wins, Gollum has to show him the way out. So they play their riddle game. Right there, and Bilbo does, and you know how the book goes. Like, Bilbo manages to win the riddle game by a trickery, though. By basically having the trick question what's in his pocket, which is the ring that Gollum lost. And then Gollum notices his precious is lost, and Bilbo has it, and so Gollum is furious that Bilbo cheated in the game, and Gollum chases him, but then Bilbo discovers that the ring grants him invisibility. And then, of course, like, when he sees, like, and then, like, of course, Gandalf then shows up, rescues the dwarfs, kills the Goblin King. And then, and when he sees, like, Gandalf and the dwarves escaping, getting out of the mountain, Bilbo's trying to find a way to be able to reunite them without being spotted by Gollum. Wait for Gollum to be distracted easily, but... So then, like, he does kind of encounter Gollum through invisibility because he still has the ring on, but when he has the chance to kill Gollum, Bilbo decides to spare him and escapes with the rest of the dwarves. And Gollum is left in despair over losing his ring. There, and that pretty much sets up his never-ending trying to pursue Frodo and the ring in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. What Jackson really got right with the characters, like, the returning characters are still the same. Galadriel, Gollum, like, they're definitely even more improved here. The scenes, like, with Bilbo and Gollum meet is definitely one of the best scenes of the film. Like, the mood, the atmosphere, the dialogue, and the building tension, it's really high in quality. The new characters don't disappoint either here. Like, Martin Freeman still gives the best performance of the whole cast in this trilogy. The dwarves are definitely not bad. Richard Armitage does a pretty good job as well. Like, they're like, Thorin as the one who gets the most screen time here, since he is the lead dwarf, though. But he doesn't leave too much time for the rest of the characters, though. Like, the rest of the dwarf characters, I mean. There. That's like, because the thing is, like, there's just simply too many dwarfs that really give them as much screen time to develop their personalities a little more. Jackson does try the best he can, and he does kind of succeed, though. And most of the dwarves do look different enough, and, like, all of them have, like, all of them have one quirk that really does make them stand out very well. You can't tell which one's Nori or which one's Ori by the end of the film, but you have this inclination about, like, most of them, though. Like, the ones you can obviously tell are Thorin and Balin. You obviously can tell who they are, because they're the ones that get the most screen time. They're the ones that are the most prominent. Right there. And then the other great things like the score, because Howard Shore still gives a terrific score for this film. You do hear some bits from Lord of the Rings again during the Shire scenes. You even get some new bits of the score right there. And also the action is still pretty good, which definitely does reflect kind of more humorous tone of the film. It's kind of flashy, it's fast paced, it's got creativity. Some think it's a little more silly, but it kind of fits well for this installment, and it's pretty enjoyable to watch. And the visuals are definitely still pretty great. The best visuals of the Hobbit trilogy. And the landscapes in New Zealand, they still look pretty good. There's a little bit of too much green screen in the film at times, but it's not as obvious here as it is in the next two movies. And the monsters are very well designed too. And the idea, and sadly though, the problem is, unlike Lord of the Rings, which had a reason to be a trilogy, because that's 3 books, and the books were very long. So you can see why those were long movies, and why they were a trilogy, because they were a book trilogy. Here, though, The Hobbit was turned to 3 movies because Warner Brothers wanted another Lord of the Rings. Because Peter Jackson was coming back, it's a prequel to Lord of the Rings, they wanted another Lord of the Rings on our tail. But the difference is, though, the book for The Hobbit actually goes by kind of quick. It's not really that long. And it's only 1 book. So you didn't need to make this 3 movies. Like, maybe 2-parter is understandable, but not 3 movies. And you'll find out more of that in the later reviews. An interesting thing is, like, right here, is that it's kind of like as if they just saw, like, Star Wars got a prequel trilogy and decided, hey, Lord of the Rings needs to be like Star Wars, so let's give it a prequel trilogy. And this was like back before the sequel trilogy caused people to see the prequels weren't that bad. And this was back when the prequels were actually hated by people. Right there. So, just kind of a lazy idea, to be fair. This clearly was just meant to be two-parters, and Warner Bros. Just wanted more money. So, like, this one does start off great. I mean, like, this one does start off great compared to, like, the rest of them. I mean, the rest of them could come later. Like, I'm sorry, guys. This is my first time reviewing it in quite a lot of weeks, so sorry if this... I'm just, like, frozen in thought a lot of times, but... Now we get on with the finale of the movie. Whereas, during the time when the dwarves are held captured by the goblins, the Goblin King reveals to the dwarves that Azog, our badly designed antagonist, our lame antagonist of this trilogy, who's this orc war chief that killed Thor and lost his form to Thor in a battle outside the kingdom of Moria. He placed a bounty on Thorn's head around the time, and the goblins are about to alert Azog that they have Thor in the game in prison for them to kill. But the Gandalf arrives. He obviously frees the doors, kills the Goblin King, and Bilbo exits the mountain after he spares Gollum, rejoins them, and keeps his like new obtained ring a secret. But then, of course, just as they get out, he obviously doesn't reveal to Gandalf he found this ring, and obviously, though Gandalf kind of clearly knows he found this ring and looks a little bit worried and suspicious, and you definitely find out in the later films exactly why he's a little worried that ring got found. Especially because that's Sauron's ring, and that's going to bring back Sauron, and but you know, like, that's going to happen because, like, Lord of the Rings comes after this, so... But then, of course, Azog and his hunting party ambush the company, so the company takes refuge in the trees, and Thorin charges to fight Azog, but overpowers and injures him with his warg, though Bilbo then musters up courage and saves and fights Azog, saves Thorin from the orcs, fights Azog, and just as the company then gets rescued by eagles summoned by Gandalf. So, after the eagles save the company, they escape to the safety of the Karak, and Gandalf revives Thorin, and he now has respect for Bilbo, and admits he was wrong about Bilbo. And so, and when they're on there, they see the Lonely Mountain in the distance, and it shows they're almost there. They're getting closer to the Lonely Mountain. And a thrush then flies to the Lonely Mountain and knocks the snail against a stone. And inside that Lonely Mountain, you meet the antagonist you're going to see in the next film. Smaug wakes up. He hears that thrush, opens his eyes. That's the end of the beginning. The end of the first chapter of this trilogy. Sets up the next movie, which I could not wait for the next year, and that you'll find out that bit in the next review. But that's the end of the unexpected journey. Right there. They're getting closer to the Lonely Mountain, and Smaug has been awoken and the thrush has now awoken Smaug. So, what would be my bad qualities for this movie? Well, I mentioned Azog. I'm not a fan of the Azog character. But another character I'm not a fan of is Radagast. Radagast I thought was the most pointless character of the trilogy. His bunny sled is way too damn ridiculous. Yeah. Saruman and Galadriel are back, but their scene just kind of feels a little boring at times. It doesn't really have much relevance to the main narrative. Like, they do play a little bit of a better narrative in the next two, right there. But yes, a bit of too much slapstick humor as well. There's a bit of like burp jokes and snot jokes. And yeah, I get The Hobbit was a children's book, but like, this is Tolkien's Middle Earth you're watching, though. You're not watching a goofy parody or something. Like, the movie, like, the Peter Jackson series is supposed to be a much more mature adaptation. right there. And adding all this stupid humor just kind of really messes with the tone. It doesn't feel like it belongs in the Lord of the Rings universe that The Hobbit was trying hard to replicate. And sometimes it just goes from trying to be epic to a bunch of gags. And we could have had a bit more dialogue and more exploration of the peoples of Middle-earth. I know the extended edition does that kind of a little more, but it's kind of more for the theatrical cut. And in the book, the dwarves spent 2 weeks in Rivendell. The film portrays they only spent, makes it look like they spent only an hour in there. And barely even, it kind of cheapens, the Rivendell sequence. And in the book, the dwarves don't even want to leave Rivendell. But in the film, they basically do. Right there. And I'm sure some may find this scene funny, but someone who's read the Hobbit book in school, back in high school, it's just kind of a little weird disservice. And how the dwarves get captured by the goblins, not really true to the source material. Bilbo also got captured in the book, but for some weird reason, he doesn't get noticed before he does get the One Ring. And when it comes to the lead character of Thorn in this trilogy, Richard Armitage gives a good performance as the character, but it's not that interesting of a character in my eyes, because in this movie he doesn't really have many likable moments. I think the best time he's portrayed are not in this movie. I think the best time he does get portrayed are Desolation of Smaug and Battle of the Five Armies in the very end. Right there. And yeah, he just kind of hates Bilbo a little too much, and he kind of knows he's just going to accept Bilbo in the end of the movie, so it kind of goes a bit cliche with this character here. But other than those, Hobbit Unexpected Journey is a pretty good starter that is actually definitely worth the watch if you did like The Lord of the Rings and are interested in seeing a movie adaptation of Bilbo's adventure. So in the end, The Hobbit Unexpected Journey, I would say, is the one of the trilogy that is totally worth buying for your Middle-earth collection, but don't expect to know Lord of the Rings because you're not really going to get that here. Anyways, that's it for my review of Hobbit Unexpected Journey. If you're wondering how I rank Hobbit Unexpected Journey, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you are keen on seeing the story that chronologically started all of this, then I would totally watch and buy Hobbit Unexpected Journey for your collection, no doubt. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rate The Hobbit Unexpected Journey, I'm going to give The Hobbit Unexpected Journey a 7.5 out of 10. And there we go, guys. That wraps up my review for The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey. Now I want to know in the comments down below what you guys thought of Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, and of course I will be reviewing Desolation of Smaug. I've already watched that last night. I just have to re-watch the Battle of the Five Armies again, so that's going to be interesting. The last time I saw, the last time I had saw those two was in the theater. I didn't see them when they hit DVD. This one I have watched when it hit DVD because this is the one I like. Desolation is alright. Battle of Five Armies. You think you know my thoughts on that one. But yeah, tell me in the comments down below what you guys thought of it. And until then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.